Once upon a time, in the village of Langasa, there was a forbidden river that was left abandoned by the villagers. Stories of an evil mermaid had been told for many generations, especially to the men, warning them to beware of the river and never go there. The elders of the village told the people that anyone who ever ventured to the river would never come out again, and everyone in the village feared and avoided the river except a man named Kwame. He was a brave and bold man who never cared about the villagers' superstitions. He had been sneaking into the forbidden river to fish since he started his fishing business. The market day was the following morning, and Kwame nonchalantly packed his fishing net and went to the forbidden river. As he started fishing, his hook caught something very heavy. Kwame was excited, and as he pulled upwards, the surface of the water started to glow yellow and brighter. He didn't know what he was pulling, but he kept pulling to the surface. Kwame was shocked when he saw a glowing mermaid, unconsciously hooked by his fishing string. As he dragged her to the riverbank, studying her body, the mermaid suddenly opened her eyes and pulled Kwame down with her into the river. In a matter of seconds, he was in a cave with shallow water and airspace. After all these centuries, I have finally gotten a man, the golden mermaid said as she moved close to Kwame, caressing his body. Kwame begged the mermaid to let him go, but she refused. I will make you my husband, the mermaid said, and every night she would lay with Kwame. One day, when the mermaid wasn't around, Kwame tried to swim out the cave. When he managed to get to the surface, he weakly ran to the village. Everyone was surprised to see Kwame after months of being missing. When he returned, he told them his story and what the golden mermaid had done to him. After a few days, when Kwame thought everything was over, the golden mermaid was already pregnant and needed Kwame to be with her when she wanted to give birth. The golden mermaid then swam to the shore of the river and started singing a song which reached Kwame where he was. The song pulled him to the river, and with Kwame by her side, she gave birth to a child, a girl. A villager saw Kwame being mysteriously pulled and told the other villagers who noticed Kwame was missing again. They all ran to the forbidden river where they saw the golden mermaid with Kwame. They ran towards the mermaid and stabbed her. Kwame was shouting, telling them to stop, but the villagers had already killed the golden mermaid. The baby in Kwame's hands was crying loudly. The villagers demanded that the mermaid's baby be killed as well. Kwame refused to give up the baby and managed to escape, running away from the village with his baby in his hands. Kwame went to another village where he worked tirelessly to raise his baby. He named her Akosua, which means mother's death. Akosua grew up to be a strong, beautiful lady, unaware of her past. Kwame only told her that her mother had died during childbirth. One fateful morning, as Akosua was walking down from a hill, she heard a strange noise of drums and celebration from a distance. It sounded very unusual and appealing to her for some reason, so she decided to follow the sound. She followed the sound to a very large river where she saw some of the villagers swimming. Akosua could now hear the drumming and celebration louder, but couldn't see any sign of people celebrating. She entered the water and started swimming. Suddenly, the noise and song became louder and clearer. It was coming from underwater. Akosua was shocked and looked at the villagers swimming around the river. Good evening, people. Can you hear the song from underneath? She asked, but they only cast sarcastic glances at her. A girl named Amma swam towards her. Hello, which sound are you talking about? She asked Akosua, who also moved towards her. I'm hearing some music from underwater. Don't tell me you can't hear it. It sounds very... Before Akosua could finish her speech, Amma suddenly vanished, pulled with incredible speed down under the water. Akosua, in shock, quickly followed. As Akosua swam downward, she saw two big mermen pulling Amma, who was choking and gasping in the water, away. Akosua swam with great speed, following them. The merman turned round, looking at her in amusement and disbelief. After swimming down for a few minutes, she finally saw where the drumming was coming from, a mighty kingdom of mermaids and mermen holding a festival, drumming and dancing. As the Maya people saw the strange girl swimming towards them, following their warriors, they quickly swam towards her and grabbed her. They brought her to the front of the festival, and a very large man with two tails swam boldly towards her. Who are you, and how come you could get into our kingdom? He asked. It was then that Akosua discovered she had been breathing underwater. I don't know. I just followed the kidnappers, she replied, and this shocked the Mer people more. She can speak underwater. Impossible, they muttered to themselves. The two-tailed merman then swam towards her. You are an abomination, and we don't like abominations. He turned to the Mer people and shouted, the gods have blessed us with two sacrifices today. It won't be just one girl as we are used to. And all the Mer people shouted happily. They tied Akosua up and placed her with the unconscious Amma, pulling them both to the center of the river kingdom, where a giant fish with sharp teeth was sleeping with its mouth open. You shall taste good to our gods, the two-tailed merman shouted, and they threw both Akosua and Amma into the mouth of the fish. As the fish swallowed both of them, Akosua's skin touched one of the fish's teeth, and it broke her skin. As soon as Akosua and Amma reached the stomach of the fish, her blood fell into the fish's stomach. The fish let out an extremely loud screeching noise that immediately woke Amma, and it swam away from the Mer people. This was unbelievable to the Mer people because the fish hadn't moved from that spot for centuries. The great fish swam violently through the water because it is against its nature to taste a mermaid's blood. Still making an incredibly loud noise, it dashed through the river, and after a few seconds, it spat out Akosua and Amma on the shores of an uninhabited jungle far away. As Akosua and Amma landed on the shore, their hearts were pounding loudly, and they ran to the shore, clinging tightly to each other. After a few minutes, Akosua looked at Amma. Are you okay? You were unconscious all the time we were at the Mer People's Kingdom. Amma looked at her in panic, still trying to catch her breath. Mermaid's Kingdom. What do you mean, mermaids? Did we just come out from a very giant catfish? She asked, and Akosua nodded. We have to leave this jungle and find a village to stay before night falls, Akosua said, and they both went into the jungle. They walked for hours, each one clinging to the other in fear. They sang songs until they finally arrived on a walking path. As they walked a little further, they saw a signboard saying, Welcome to Langasa Village. Akosua and Amma quickly ran inside and talked with some of the elders of the village, telling them their story. The elders watched both of them skeptically and also told them the story of the mermaid they had slain years ago. The elders accepted them and gave both of them a room to pass the night. On the morning of the next day, Amma and Akosua decided to continue their journey, but first they would have to take a bath since they could still smell the fish on their bodies. They asked around for water, and the villagers directed them to the river where Akosua was born, unknown to her. They both went there with their pots, and as soon as Akosua's hand touched the water, she transformed into a golden mermaid. Amma, watching her, screamed, and soon everyone in the river started screaming, Mermaid! Mermaid! The village men were alerted, and Akosua was still in shock, looking at her scales. Amma kept staring at her in disbelief. When the village men arrived with their arrows, they shot at Akosua. Amma ran to stop them, but an arrow hit her in the arm. Akosua shouted loudly, watching Amma fall to the ground. Akosua was crawling to Amma when the village men of Langasa carried her and Amma to the center of the village. They put Amma, who was bleeding out, beside Akosua, and they surrounded her, singing, "Every mermaid must die in Langasa. Every mermaid must die." Akosua begged them to help her bleeding friend and explained how she didn't know how this happened to her, reminding the elders of her previous story. Then one of the elders approached her with a machete. "Where is your mother, young lady?" Akosua told him her mom died during childbirth and her dad raised her on his own in another village. "Is your dad the fisherman by any chance?" the old man asked, and Akosua nodded in confirmation, pleading with them to save her bleeding friend Amma. The man then shouted, "I killed your mother, you evil mermaid. You are the daughter of Kwame, the traitor who betrayed his own village." Hearing what the old man said, Akosua stopped and looked at the man with a calm, angry, shaky voice. "What did you say, mister?" Akosua asked, and the man responded, "I said I stabbed your mother with the same cutlass I will use to end you." Akosua let out a scream so loud and powerful that Kwame, who had been searching for Akosua all over the village, heard it. The Mera people of the river also heard it. "That's one of ours," the two-tailed king muttered. Suddenly, water came out from the ground, surrounding Akosua and Amma, forming a large tornado. As the roaring wave of water surrounded them, the great fish emerged, opening its mouth. Akosua carried Amma inside the fish, and the tornado destroyed everything in the village of Langasa. As the great fish swam away, Akosua attended to Amma in the stomach of the fish. When the great fish arrived, all the mermaids and mermen gathered in front of it. The fish opened its mouth and Akosua swam out. They all looked at her in amusement. "She's of royal blood," they said to themselves. The two-tailed merman swam out again. "You are of royalty. You are always welcome in our midst, but I sense danger flowing through your veins," he said. Akosua then told him about the injured Amma, and he sent some mermaids to go nurse her wound. They then performed some findings to discover who Akosua's parents were and learned it was the outcast queen of war who had been banished from the kingdom. Akosua told them the story of her life growing up. It all clicked that she had both the blood of the land and the sea flowing in her. The two-tailed merman told her to call her father and tell him she was okay, but Akosua didn't know how to do that. "I don't know how that works," Akosua said, and all the Mira people around her smiled. "You called everyone in the kingdom a few minutes ago. That ability is rare even for queens, and now you can't call your father?" The two-tailed merman said, smiling. "Anytime you hum a melody from your heart, the family member or loved one you are thinking about will hear you and come to you. That's how it works, and that's how you've always done it," he said. A mermaid approached Akosua and the two-tailed merman as they were speaking. "My king, the injured lady in the great fish will need to be treated at the surface. Our medicine is keeping her stable, but she can't eat food." The two-tailed merman nodded to Akosua, and she went inside the great fish to see Amma, who was still shocked by everything that was happening. "Oh my God, you are a mermaid, a golden one," Amma said, touching Akosua's tail. Akosua smiled at her. "I will be taking you home now. Plus, I have to see my dad." Then Akosua hummed, and the great fish closed its mouth, carrying them to the surface. Kwame, on the other hand, ran to his previous village and saw that it was destroyed. Some armed men, still remaining, saw him and chased him back. "See what your useless daughter has caused. You and your daughter will both die," they shouted as Kwame ran back, assured his daughter was still alive. Suddenly, he heard a familiar song that pulled him towards the river in his new village. There he met his daughter, Akosua, Ama, and the mighty fish. Kwame ran towards Akosua and hugged her. Akosua told him everything he had kept from her and showed him her friend Ama and the great fish. Akosua told her father Kwame to carry Ama to a clinic to help her and reassured him she would soon be back. Kwame carried Ama and went forward a few steps. A mob of angry men suddenly ran towards Akosua and the great fish, and both quickly swam back into the river. Unknown to Akosua, her father and Ama had already been captured. The armed men from the village of Langasa were now in agreement with the new village after they saw what Akosua had done to their village. They wanted Akosua and her father Kwame dead. They captured Kwame in a prison, and after a few days of Ama getting well, they carried her to the shore and told her to call the fish and deliver a message to Akosua and the mer people that they have Akosua's father and she must come out with all the mer people to save him. Ama told them she didn't know anything about calling the great fish, but the men beat her mercilessly until she was crying in pain. The great fish suddenly jolted in the mermaid's kingdom and dashed out, swimming violently towards the surface, shocking everyone, including Akosua, because no humans can connect with the great fish. As the men were still hitting Ama, the great fish jumped out of the water, biting and hitting the men away, and it swallowed Ama and swam back inside the river to the mermaid's kingdom. When it arrived, Akosua could tell Ama was inside, and she swam inside the fish to meet her. Ama, badly beaten, told Akosua what was going on and the war that was about to happen. Akosua was angry and she yelled, holding her head, which also pulled all the mirror people closer to the fish. She swam out and told them the men on land had captured her father and they wanted war. Some of the mer people shouted in agreement for war, but the two-tailed merman reminded them of the tales of Akosua's mother, the queen of chaos and war, and advised Akosua to go alone peacefully the next day and prevent war. Akosua agreed, and when the following day arrived, she got prepared. She and Ama in the great fish swam to the surface. As they arrived at the surface, they met the angry village men in thousands, and the man who had slain her mother was holding Kwame in his hands, staring at her menacingly. Then he spoke. We told you to bring the whole fish people, but you came alone. You disobeyed us, bringing a weak child and a dumb fish. Akosua swam forward, her tail turning into legs as it touched the shore. I come in peace, mister. I'm sorry I ruined your village. I am the one guilty and I am the one to be punished. Akosua said, Punished? You shall be put to death, little fish. But since you said punished, I shall punish you first by slitting your father's throat, he said, as he cut Kwame's throat, and Kwame fell to the ground, bleeding out, looking into Akosua's eyes. Akosua looked at her father choking on the ground. Her golden eyes shone bright yellow, and she let out a scream that moved the whole river. The great fish roared with her, and her scream pulled all the mer people out of the river. A war broke out, and Akosua ran towards the man who killed her father. She used a wall of water to stop him from moving and marched towards him. She held his throat firmly. I should punish you by killing your wife and kids, but I guess I already did that. I shall perhaps give you a more painful death. Choking you would be mercy, Akosua said as she carried him towards the great fish, which removed his lower body, munching on him gladly. Ama jumped out of the great fish, hiding behind it fearfully as some men came to attack her. The great fish fought violently, being bruised by arrows and spears. Akosua fought, slaying men, and her anger only increased as she saw her dead father lying on the ground. The village men kept shooting arrows and recruiting more troops, but Akosua was too angry to retreat. All she wanted was for all of them to be dead. The village men finally overpowered the great fish, and one of them caught Ama beside the great fish. "Little traitor," he said, and he plunged a spear into her heart, which also penetrated the great fish. Both of them screamed loudly, which reached Akosua, who was fighting violently. She turned around and saw the last string of her earthly relationship stabbed. The great fish tried to fight, but was already badly injured. As Akosua ran towards them, she got to Ama and held her in her arms, touching her fluffy hair as she died, and the great fish mourned its last breath. Tears filled Akosua's eyes. In a single day, she had lost all her family. When the two-tailed merman saw they weren't winning, he ordered his mer people to retreat, and this angered Akosua even more. She turned and stood up, lifting her hands. A wave of mighty waters arose from the river, following her, and as she dropped her hands, it crashed on her and all the village men on the shore, killing every single one of them. Since then, Akosua was never seen again. The river's color changed into two unmixing parts of water with different hues. Some people say it is the blood of the fallen village men and mer people, while some say it is the spirit of Akosua, the spirit of land and water, still hovering inside the river. This tale of the forbidden river became legendary, passing down through generations in the villages surrounding Langasa. Years passed, and the once vibrant village of Langasa became known for its eerie silence and the peculiar river that no one dared approach. New villagers, unaware of the ancient legend, would sometimes wander too close, but the older inhabitants would quickly warn them away with hushed voices and fearful eyes. Meanwhile, in the mermaid kingdom deep beneath the river, Akosua had transformed into a guardian spirit, revered and respected by all the mer people. Her bravery and sacrifice became a symbol of unity between the land and the sea, a delicate balance maintained by the memory of her actions.